Mr. French, many thanks for making time to speak to us. First of all, many commitments being made here, but of course the first question here would be, is there a kind of a mechanism to actually reflect and see if the commitments that are being made are actually being followed up, or is this another one of those symposiums where lots of promises are made and not so much after?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Arnold. I think that this forum was from the very beginning designed to be different than any of the other past forums on investment. It was designed to be a transaction-generating platform and not a talk shop. And that was really kind of in the DNA, in the planning of the entire event. So a lot of work was done prior to the forum in teeing up deals, and those deals were confirmed during the forum, and others were in fact generated at the forum. So these are actual deals. My understanding is, of course, there's a lot of work to do from now on, but this is an improvement in past events in which the deals are actually real and going to happen.
We're seeing some taglines like the Davos of Africa coming up already. Of course, this is early days. It's only the first one of its kind. Do you get the sense that this is maybe being teed up as a Davos of sorts? I don't want to say in the desert, but maybe on the motherland.
Right. I think that's not a bad comparison in the sense that it's a model. This was the inaugural event, and the model is being perfected as we speak. There are a lot of lessons learned. The transaction focus, I think, was an important part of it. There are a lot of, just kind of things that have been generated, data, information, observations that have been generated from the panel, or from the various panels. And I'm sure that over the next few months, the African Development Bank and others will try to make it a much more efficient process and repeat it and improve over time.
It's quite fascinating. You're more drawn towards the tech side, and many of the commitments that we have been seeing over the years are more driven by infrastructure. Of course, tech has a huge hand to play here too. Just give me a sense of what actually caught your eye when it comes to the tech space, away from the rails that are being made. I mean, we did see a commitment to build a bridge actually between Kinshasa and Brazzaville.
Right. I was speaking to some people yesterday in the Congo, and they were very excited about that. So yes, in fact, the tech scene excites me in Africa because, first of all, the growth is tremendous. I mean, that's the growth in tech is probably the fastest growing sector there is. Last year, there was about $530 million in deals done. This year, we're on track for about $1 billion in deal. The way that I look at it, I kind of like, there's a thought device that helps me think about tech. If you look at the large multi-trillion-dollar platform companies in the world, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Baidus, the Alibabas, the Tencents, they generally look at Africa as being kind of the next billion users, the next billion eyes and consumers to connect to their platform. That says something. What that says is that there's a tremendous untapped value in Africa for the platform companies. And they see this as being one of the future pillars of their growth. What I tried to focus on in this panel was, what is Africa's agenda? How can Africa produce productive solutions for intractable problems using data strategies, using platform ecosystem strategies? How can Africa be in the driver's seat of monetizing and producing value from its data?
James, let me just stop you there for a bit, because if you are to look at many of the big boys, the FANG,
right,
and their presence on maybe China, the bigger markets, India, one thing actually stands out when it comes from the market side. It's the fact that many of these markets where they are ripping big have a huge, well, relatively bigger per capita income as opposed to Africa. Our average of sub-Saharan Africa is still very, very low, and a middle class that is almost non-existent when it comes to many of these companies from Silicon Valley. Isn't this something we need to first address? Because the big tech companies will shun us because of our middle class that is almost non-existent, and that ultimately means our disposable income is not present.
True. I mean, there is, Africa obviously lags other more prosperous regions in the world. However, it's the long-term trend of growth that is really at issue here. As many people have pointed out, by 2034, Africa is projected to be the home of the largest source of working age people, more than twice the rest of the world combined. By 2050, 1 in 4 human beings will be from Africa. Now, the growth trends in Africa have been more or less constant, even though there have been some bumps along the road. So platform companies are looking at long-term trends. It is the last region in the world to be monetized from their perspective. The real question is, how does Africa drive its own agenda in the cyberspace industries? And the kind of, I don't want to use the word magic, but kind of the very the advantage of tech-driven industries is that they focus on the data that is generated by all economic activity.
Right.
When data is generated from, energy, financial payments, banking, et cetera, that data is stored and analyzed and can be used for other solutions. And that's the beauty of it.
James, I hear you here, but let me just put one to you.
Yes.
How many satellites have been launched from this continent?
I couldn't tell you, but I think that that's not necessarily an indicator of the entire capacity of the tech system.
And don't you get the sense that if we remain reliant on satellites that are launched from China, the States, of course, and creating all this debris and the stratosphere and above, don't you get the sense that we will remain, at least with the tech bubble, a few years from now, when we are the largest populace across the globe, we will still remain, at least tech-wise, reliant on whoever owns the satellites as it is?
Well, I mean, there's I get your point. I mean, part of the point is who owns the infrastructure, who owns the satellites, but also who owns the data centers, who owns the cable. Africa is in the process of looking at, I heard during the forum, several projects to create data centers. And, it's one step at a time. There are a lot of cable, wireless fiber cable projects that are right now being developed, and a lot of those have African partners. So you're right in the sense that there is a very important play for infrastructure. There's also an equally important play for data. And the focus that I've tried, at least during this first forum, is to focus the attention of all of the delegates on the value of the data, because the data can be used to solve a whole variety of other issues, such as how do you finance SMEs? How do you integrate financial markets? How do you mobilize local currency so that local currency trapped now in isolated, fragmented markets can be used to accompany investment in infrastructure? Those are things that data can help you do.
I hear you there, and I love that you're going with the more practical examples, like how do you finance SMEs? My biggest problem often is Western problems, being someone trying to solve Western problems on the African continent, like escalators on a 2-story building. And the reason why I bring that up is, for once we saw something being developed like M-Pesa.
Right.
And it's very successful. Why? Because it is a solution for an African problem.
Right.
Do you get the sense that this was actually being addressed at the forum as it is last week? Someone actually trying to solve African problems as opposed to just mere rhetoric.
Oh, no. I think this is a very good point that you bring up. I think the people that I interacted with on the panel that I moderated were visionaries in terms of trying to solve African problems. We had a company called Atlan Space out of Morocco, and they are developing artificial intelligence-driven drones to map farmers so that they can produce titles to land and to look at the erosion of lands and global warming. We had the Silas Adenkule, the most successful robotics engineer on the planet, including Silicon Valley, who's looking at education in Africa using robotics and industrial the fourth industrial revolution using robotics. We had a lot of very forward-looking investors and technology leaders looking at African problems, and I would include upon that the problem of SME development.